You know what silently destroys thousands of lives? It's not failure. It's not mistakes. It's the chaos inside. The storm of thoughts that are never expressed. The mental noise you hope will fade on its own, but it doesn't. It grows louder, heavier, and it slowly eats you alive. Let me ask you something. What if the freedom you've been chasing, the clarity you've been begging for, the peace you can't seem to find, was hidden in the one thing you refuse to do? What if it all begins the moment you write your thoughts down? You might be walking through life with a full heart and an overloaded mind, but a straight face. You've learned to pretend, to function, to survive, but not to express. And that's where the real damage begins. What you don't say, stays. What you don't release, repeats. How many times have you told yourself that everything is okay, simply because you didn't know how to put your inner turmoil into words? You move through your day like everyone else. You respond to messages, you show up at work, you engage in conversations. But beneath that surface lies a mental storm that no one sees. And the most dangerous thing about it, even you have stopped noticing how loud it really is. You've gotten used to it. The constant noise in your head, the self-doubt, the overthinking, the regrets that play on repeat, the unanswered questions that circle around like vultures. You've learned to live with it, to function, but not to feel free. There is this weight, subtle but relentless, that follows you everywhere. It's there in the quiet moments. When you finally sit down and silence surrounds you, it creeps in during those gaps between distractions, right before you fall asleep or the second you wake up. That's when your thoughts strike the hardest. You wonder what you're doing wrong, why you're always exhausted, why you feel disconnected from yourself, even when you're surrounded by others. It's not always a scream. Sometimes it's just a low, heavy hum in the background. But that hum shapes your mood, your energy, your decision, and because you never let it out, it keeps growing. It becomes part of your identity without your permission. The worst part is that the outside world doesn't see any of this. You've mastered the art of holding it all in. You laugh at the right moments, you say the right words, you perform, and because you look fine, no one asks if you really are. So the performance continues, day after day, week after week. You become an actor in your own life, rehearsing lines, pretending everything is stable while something inside you keeps breaking apart. And the longer you stay silent, the more distant you become. From others, but mostly from yourself. You lose touch with your own needs, your own truth, your own voice. And that's exactly why the simple act of writing your thoughts down is not a trivial suggestion. It's a lifeline. When you're trapped in your mind, you start believing that everything you think is absolute. You stop questioning the stories you tell yourself. You start accepting fear as truth. Writing is how you begin to break that pattern. When you write, you take what's swirling inside and give it a shape. You force yourself to slow down the whirlwind, to translate emotion into language. And that act alone begins to bring relief. Because now your thoughts are no longer just noise. They are words, visible, concrete, real. And once they are real, you can deal with them. There's a kind of magic that happens when you see your thoughts on paper. You begin to notice patterns, fears that repeat, phrases that echo, lies you've told yourself too often. You realize that many of your worries aren't rooted in the present moment, but in old wounds you never healed. You spot contradiction, confusion, hidden truths. You start to separate what's real from what you've been projecting, and suddenly things that felt massive become manageable. You stop being overwhelmed because you've broken the chaos into pieces you can hold, examine, and work with. It's not about writing poetry or being articulate. It's not about sharing it with anyone. This is between you. It's about showing up for yourself when no one else knows what you're going through. It's about creating a space where you don't need to perform, where you don't need to explain, where your pain, your questions, your anger, your dreams, everything is allowed to exist without judgment. You don't need to know where to start. Just begin. Even with a single sentence, even with I don't know what I'm feeling. That's enough. Because from there, the door opens. And once the door is open, your truth starts to come through. When you hold everything inside, it festers, it grows in the dark. But when you write it down, you bring it into the light. You see it for what it is, and what you can see, you can understand. What you can understand, you can change. You stop being the prisoner of your thoughts and start becoming the observer, the one who decides what stays and what goes. You begin to understand that not every thought is a fact, that not every emotion needs to be feared, that the power has always been in your hands, you just needed a place to express it. Writing won't solve everything in a day, but it starts something. It starts the process of coming back to yourself. It gives you a mirror, a map, and a moment of clarity in a world that never stops moving. You begin to feel less alone, even when you're alone, because suddenly you're listening to yourself again. And that is the beginning of everything. There is something powerful, almost sacred, about the act of taking a pen and putting your truth on paper. It's not just about telling a story or journaling your day, it's a personal awakening. When you begin to write, you begin to hear yourself without interruption. No outside noise, no opinions, no filters. Just you and the raw essence of what you've been carrying. And for many, that's the first time they've ever truly listened to themselves. It might start with hesitation, with a kind of fear, because you know that once the ink touches the page, there's no more hiding. But it's in that very moment that healing begins. Because what you're writing is not for show, it's not for validation, and it's not for applause. It's for survival, it's for liberation, it's for finally setting down the weight you've carried for far too long. Each word you write becomes a thread in a tapestry of self-discovery. And you don't always know what's going to come out until you start. One line leads to another. A vague feeling suddenly becomes a clear thought. A memory you thought you'd forgotten rises from the silence. Things you buried so deep that even you stop believing they matter begin to resurface. Writing opens the doors that your mind has kept shut in the name of protection, of control, of fear. But once those doors open, something inside you exhales for the first time. It's not about the beauty of the sentences or the grammar you use. It's about the truth they carry. Your truth. As you write, a strange thing happens. You start to see parts of yourself that you've denied. You remember the little versions of you that never got a voice. The hurt, the confused, the angry, the scared, the dreaming, the hopeful. You meet them again. On the page, they speak. On the page, they breathe. And in letting them speak, you finally stop pretending. You stop performing strengths and you allow space for honesty. That kind of honesty is rare in everyday life. We spend so much time putting on masks, being who we think we're supposed to be, hiding what we think we shouldn't feel. But the page doesn't judge, it doesn't interrupt, it doesn't ask for perfection, it just listens. And that in itself is profoundly healing. The emotions you've numbed, ignored, or denied come alive when given permission to speak. Maybe you write a sentence and suddenly tears fall. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally safe. Safe to feel, safe to remember, safe to release. Writing allows you to grieve what you didn't even know you lost. It allows you to forgive who you didn't realize you were still angry at. It allows you to admit that you're tired, broken, or afraid, without fear of consequence. In this private space, nothing is too much, nothing is too dramatic, nothing is wrong. It's just you and the truth you've held in silence. And in that silence, clarity begins to form. You start to see why certain things hurt you so much. You see patterns you've been stuck in. You recognize voices in your head that aren't even yours. Echoes of others' fears, criticisms, expectations. You begin to understand your reactions, your habits, your wounds. In writing creates a space between you and the chaos, a space where you're no longer drowning in emotion, but observing it, understanding it, and eventually releasing it. There's something deeply empowering about realizing that you can write your pain down and it doesn't control you anymore. that it lives on paper now. Not as a burden in your chest, but as a message you can reflect on. And when you revisit those words days, weeks, or years later, you see how far you've come. You see the growth, the strength, the depth. You realize that what once felt unbearable is now a part of your journey. Not a prison, but a stepping stone. Because what's written can be witnessed, and what's witnessed can be transformed. Writing becomes your mirror. It shows you who you were, who you are, and who you can become. It connects the dots between your thoughts, your feelings, and your reality. It gives you the power to speak when you have no one to talk to reflect when life moves too fast, to heal when the world doesn't understand. It gives your inner world a language, a rhythm, a shape, and through it, you begin to reclaim yourself. The more you write, the more you realize you don't have to be afraid of what's inside you. You don't have to run from your own mind. You don't have to suppress your own heart. You just have to listen patiently, courageously, and then respond with ink, with presence, with truth. Because on that page, in those quiet lines, you are not just remembering who you are becoming who you were always meant to be. One word at a time. There are moments in life when everything feels heavy, and yet you can't point to a single reason why. You wake up tired, you go through the day distracted, you try to be productive, to be present, to be grateful, but something feels off. And when you sit with yourself, hoping to find clarity, all you meet is confusion. Thoughts pull you in different directions. You want something, but you're not sure what. You think you should do one thing, but something in you resists. There's noise, doubt, contradiction, and all of it is invisible. No one around you sees it. But it's real, it's exhausting, and it's what keeps you stuck. This is what happens when your inner world gets cluttered. When your thoughts go unfiltered, when your feelings stay unnamed, when your mind becomes a storage room instead of a living space. Writing becomes the light switch in that room. It doesn't fix everything instantly, but it gives you something you've been missing. Visibility. When you write, you begin to empty the mental drawer that have been overflowing. You start to label things. You slow down. You stop carrying every thought at once, and instead you set them down one by one, like puzzle pieces on a table. You begin to ask questions you've avoided. What am I really afraid of? What am I trying to prove? What's actually important to me? Not to others, not to the world, but to me. These questions don't always have immediate answers. But writing makes them visible, and visibility is where clarity begins. Most of the time, you're not overwhelmed because you're weak, you're overwhelmed because your thoughts are disorganized. You feel lost not because you lack potential, but because you've never had a moment to stop, breathe, and sort through what's yours and what's not. Writing offers you that pause. It lets you sit with your inner landscape, not to judge it or change it, but simply to understand it. You start noticing how much of your inner conflict comes from voices that aren't even yours, the pressure to succeed, the fear of judgment, the need to please. Where did all that come from? Who taught you that being exhausted means you're doing something right? Who told you that your feelings were too much? Writing brings those voices to the surface. And once they're on paper, you can separate them. You begin to differentiate between truth and conditioning, between your voice and the noise of others. You gain perspective. You step out of the story and start observing it. That's when real clarity shows up. It's not about having all the answers. It's about realizing which questions actually matter. It's about finding the space to breathe between your thoughts. And most of all, it's about reconnecting to yourself. Not the version you perform, but the one you live with when no one's watching. The dirme, the zepardi. And you can write about the day you just lived. You can write about the thoughts that keep repeating. You can write about your fears without needing to fix them. Sometimes it's in writing the mess that you realize it's not as big as it felt in your head. Sometimes you discover that what you called confusion was actually your heart trying to speak, but your mind was too loud to hear it. And sometimes, writing doesn't give you clarity in the moment, but it plants a seed. A few days later, a sentence you wrote comes back to you. And suddenly, something clicks, something shifts. That's the power of written words. They echo, they guide, they grow with you. Clarity is not found in doing more. It's not found in seeking external advice every time you feel uncertain. It's found in pausing, in turning inward, in being honest enough to put on paper what you've been afraid to admit, even to yourself. Writing is not about making everything neat. It's about making everything known. And once it's known, you can navigate. You can choose. You can let go of what no longer serves you and hold on to what actually matters. It's easy to get caught in the trap of thinking you need something outside of you to feel better. A new job, a relationship, a change of city. But the deepest peace doesn't come from changing your environment. It comes from understanding your interior. And that understanding doesn't come from thinking more, it comes from writing more. Writing slows down your thoughts long enough for you to see what's true, what's helpful, and what's just noise. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your own mind. When you feel lost, write. When you feel unsure, write. When everything feels like too much and nothing makes sense, write. Not because it solves everything in one sitting, but because it gives you back the compass you didn't know you'd lost. And with that compass, you start walking again, not blindly, not rushed, but with direction, with awareness, with clarity. Somewhere along the way, you started believing that your voice did matter unless someone else heard it, that your thoughts weren't valid unless someone else agreed with them. So you stayed quiet. You held it in. You smiled when you were supposed to. You nodded along in conversations that left you empty. And slowly, without realizing it, you started disappearing. Not physically, but emotionally. You stopped sharing the truth of who you are. You forgot how it feels to say what you really think without editing yourself for approval. You began to live behind a mask, one carefully shaped by expectations, by fear, by silence. But when you write, you reclaim something sacred, your voice. Not the one that pleases, not the one that performs, but the one that remembers. The one that never stopped existing, just waited for a space safe enough to come alive. That's the power of the page. It becomes the only place where you don't need permission to be fully you. And in a world that's constantly trying to define you, shape you, label you, control you, writing becomes an act of resistance, a quiet rebellion. Because every sentence you write, every emotion you name, every truth you set free is a way of saying, I exist, I matter, I will not disappear inside your silence. Most people don't realize how much they've been holding back until they finally let it out. And it doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Some of the most life-changing realizations come from the softest lines. A sentence that finally puts words to something you've never been able to express. A paragraph that makes you feel seen by yourself for the first time. A single page that reminds you, this is who I am. When you write, you meet yourself again, and not the surface version, the real one. The one who still dreams, the one who's tired of pretending, the one who wants more than just survival. You begin to speak, not to be heard by others, but to finally hear yourself. And in that space, something amazing begins to happen. You start making peace with your story. You start accepting the parts of yourself you used to hide. The shame, the doubt, the grief, the anger. You let them speak, you let them exist, and not to be judged or fixed, but to be understood. Writing gives your inner world a voice, and once your inner world has a voice, your outer world begins to shift. You start showing up differently, you start honoring your needs, your boundaries, your values. You begin to live in alignment with the person you meet on the page. Your voice, once buried beneath years of silence and performance, grows stronger with every word. And it's not always about healing wounds, it's also about reclaiming dreams, remembering who you wanted to be before life got loud. Maybe you write about a version of yourself you miss. Maybe you write about a goal you were once passionate about but abandoned. Writing revives what you thought was lost. It reignites the parts of you that felt too tired to keep going. And even if you don't share those words with anyone, They start changing how you walk through the world. They reconnect you to yourself. And the more you write, the more you realize that your voice has always been there. It was never gone, just buried under layers of fear, noise, and distraction. Writing doesn't create your voice, it reveals it. And when you begin to use it on paper, something shifts inside you. You start speaking up in your life. Not always loudly, but with more confidence. You stop settling for half-truths, for shallow connections, for pretending you're okay when you're not. Because once you've tasted what it feels like to express yourself fully, you can't go back to silence. Writing becomes the training ground. It's where you practice honesty, where you learn to articulate what you feel instead of bottling it up. It's where you begin to show yourself compassion, forgiveness, and courage. You write the words you wish someone had said to you. You write the truths you were too afraid to admit. And through that process, you grow, not into someone new, but back into the person you were always meant to be, underneath everything the world tried to silence in you. The act of writing is simple: a pen, a page, a few minutes of time. But the impact is profound, because every time you choose to write instead of run, to express instead of suppress, you come back to yourself. Your voice stops being a whisper, it becomes a guide, a strength, a reminder. You don't need permission, you don't need perfection, you just need presence. And the courage to let your voice, your real voice, finally speak. There will come a time when you look back and realize that the words you wrote saved you, not because they were beautiful or perfect, but because they were honest. They carried the weight of everything you couldn't say out loud. They held the chaos, the ache, the hope, the fire, and somehow, just putting it on paper gave you the strength to keep going, to breathe again, to believe again. Writing is more than reflection, it's transformation. It's how you go from being overwhelmed to understanding, from being lost in your thoughts to finding your path through them, from being silenced by the world to speaking your own truth, louder than ever before, even if only in ink. We often wait for life to make sense before we allow ourselves to write it down. We wait for clarity, for answers, for the moment things get better. But the truth is, clarity comes through writing, not before it. Growth happens while you're still in the middle of it, not once it's all neatly wrapped up. So stop waiting to be ready. Stop waiting for the right moment. Stop waiting for someone to give you permission. The right moment is now. Your thoughts don't need to be polished, they need to be heard. And writing is where they are. Every time you write, you tell life, I am paying attention. You show the universe that you are not numb, not passive, not asleep, you are alive. And being alive means feeling, it means questioning, it means wanting more. Writing is where you engage with life, not just exist in it. And it's where you stop being a passenger in your own story and start becoming the author. Because you are the only one who can name what you truly feel, what you truly want, and what truly matters to you. No one else can do that for you. That is your responsibility and your power. Even if no one ever reads what you write, the act itself is enough. The act changes you. The act frees you. It teaches you to hold space for your emotions instead of running from them. It teaches you that your mind isn't the enemy, it's just loud, and writing quiets it. It teaches you that your story matters even if it's still unfolding. And most importantly, it reminds you that healing doesn't happen by forgetting, it happens by remembering. Gently, slowly, truthfully, and giving those memories somewhere to land. Writing is that landing place. And eventually, what once felt like pain becomes perspective. What once felt like confusion becomes clarity. What once felt like emptiness becomes self-connection. Because you wrote. Because you showed up for yourself when no one else could. Because you were brave enough to be real, on the page, in the moment, with your own soul as witness. That is a form of power the world can't take from you. It's not loud, but it's unshakable. It's not public, but it's life-altering. You don't need to be a writer to write. You don't need to be poetic to express your truth. You just need to be willing. Willing to listen to yourself, willing to show up, willing to stop pretending and start feeling. That willingness, that tiny act of picking up a pen or opening a blank page, is a declaration that your inner world matters. And once you declare that, everything begins to change. Not all at once, not with fireworks, but piece by piece, sentence by sentence, layer by layer. You will start noticing patterns in your thinking. You will begin to see how many of your beliefs were inherited, not chosen. You will question what you've accepted. You will challenge what you've feared. You will make space for new dreams, new definitions of success, new ways of being that actually feel like you. Writing becomes a mirror, but also a window. A mirror that reflects your truth back to you, and a window that opens to who you're becoming. And over time, as your notebooks fill, as your voice grows clearer, as your confidence strengthens, you realize something powerful. You are not broken. You never were. You were simply unheard, unseen, unexpressed. Writing gave you back your reflection. It gave you back you, not the version shaped by trauma, by expectation, by pressure, but the one who always knew, the one who always felt, the one who always hoped. So write when it hurts. Write when you're lost. Write when you don't know what else to do. Write when you feel joy, even if it scares you. Write when you're standing at the edge of change, because your thoughts deserve to exist. Your feelings deserve to be known. Your story deserves to be written. Not one day, not someday, but now. Not because someone's watching, but because you are. Writing your thoughts down is how you come home, again and again, until that home feels safe and familiar and completely yours. There comes a moment in every dreamer's life where the question is no longer can I, but will I keep going? That's the real test. Not how gifted you are, not how inspired you feel, not even how much you want it. The test is whether you will keep moving forward when nothing around you is changing, when the results aren't showing, when the applause is silent, when doubt is loud, when progress is slow. Because that's the part no one glamorizes. The middle. The stretch between starting and succeeding. That's where most people disappear. That's where the dream quietly dies. Not because it wasn't worth it, but because the person carrying it got tired and let go. This is the valley, the space between the vision and its manifestation. It's when you do everything right and still feel like you're standing still. And it's also where most people trade their dream for something easier, something familiar, something less painful. But if you can stay faithful in this place, if you can walk through that dry season with your heart still anchored to your purpose, you'll reach something most people never will: transformation. Because here's the truth. The dream doesn't just shape your future, it shapes you. It's not just about getting there, it's about who you become on the way. The version of you who starts to dream is not the version who will fulfill it. Something has to break, something has to grow. Something inside of you must mature, must deepen, must evolve. The journey is not just a path forward, it's a fire that purifies. It reveals who you really are. When everything is stripped away, when the excitement fades, when the motivation dries up, what's left is your why. And if your why is strong enough, no storm can move you. That's why you must learn to move without emotion. If you wait to feel ready, you'll wait forever. If you wait for perfect clarity, you'll stall every time. Fear shows up. You don't need to feel certain, you need to stay consistent. You don't need a perfect plan, you need persistent steps. People think progress is fast and flashy, but most of the time it's slow, quiet, unseen. It's showing up day after day, building brick by brick, trusting that every tiny effort matters, even when no one is watching. Resilience isn't about pretending everything's okay. It's about standing in the chaos and choosing to keep walking anyway. It's about saying, this hurts, this is hard, but I'm still here. Because one day, everything you've been building, all those hours in the dark, all the tears, all the risks, all the rejections, they will turn into something. The world will call it overnight success, but you'll know better. You'll know the price you paid, the work you did when no one noticed, the face it took to keep showing up when it felt like nothing was working. You must choose to keep your standards high, even when your circumstances are low. You must act like the person you want to become before you get there. Speak with conviction before they give you the mic. Work like a professional before anyone pays you. Show up like a winner before you have the trophy. That's how alignment works. You don't wait for the dream to show up before you live like it's real. You move as if it's already yours. Because the future doesn't just happen, it responds to preparation. This is the season where most give up, but this can also be the season where you rise, where you build discipline so strong that nothing outside of you can break what's inside of you, where you no longer rely on signs to confirm your purpose, you become your own confirmation. The kind of person who no longer needs the world's permission to move forward. The kind of person who no longer apologizes for wanting more. You start to embody the dream, not just chase it. In the end, the world rewards those who refuse to quit, not because they were the best, but because they didn't let go when it hurt. They endured, they adapted, they grew. And you can too. But it requires a vow to yourself. I won't leave this dream behind just because the road is hard. You owe it to the child you once were, the one who first imagined this life. You owe it to the future you, the one who will thank you for not giving up. So now, it's your turn. Not tomorrow, not when life finally slows down, not when everything feels clear. Now, take a pen, open a blank page, or type if that's what you prefer. It doesn't matter how. What matters is that you do it. Let it be messy, let it be raw, let it be imperfect, let it be you. Don't wait to become someone else. Before you start expressing who you are, your thoughts, as they are today, are already worth listening to. They are not too much, they are not too dark, they are not too scattered. They are yours, and that makes them enough. The world around you will always offer noise, opinions, distractions, expectations. But writing is how you rise above that noise. How you remember your own truth when everything else tries to drown it out. It's not about creating something beautiful, it's about revealing something real. You, your inner voice, your desires, your fears, your dreams, your truth. One sentence at a time, you take back your power. One page at a time, you rebuild your clarity. One truth at a time, you return to the most important relationship of all. The one you have with yourself. The pen doesn't judge. The page doesn't rush you. They are here to hold space for what the world often ignores. Your soul speaking, and maybe, just maybe, as you write, you'll find answers you didn't expect. You'll make peace with moments you couldn't make sense of. You'll forgive yourself in ways you thought were impossible. You'll create a new future, one rooted not in silence or survival, but in intention, authenticity, and presence. That future starts today. So write, not to impress, not to perform. Write to remember who you are. Write to become who you were always meant to be. Write because your thoughts, your truths, your life, they matter. Always.